Hi, I'm Seth. I'm writing this note, bottling it, and tossing it in the brook by my house. Writing helps me keep my sanity. Hopefully somebody who still reads will pick it up and come help me. It started a month ago. I was down in my basement office on my computer watching old Mystery Science Theater 3000 reruns. The phone rang next to me, but I didn't pay any attention to it. It was never for me. On the off occasion it was usually my brother, and half the time we were on the phone my nephew would be trying to grab it and talk to me himself. Mom yelled down the stairs that the phone was for me. Yeah, I lived at home with my folks. Sue me. Anyway, I picked up. Hello? I said, paying more attention to the antics of the robots on the screen. It's begun. The voice was little more than a whimper, a plea. I didn't even recognize the voice. Excuse me? I asked, wondering who on earth was calling. They've come, I don't have much time, Jeff. You told me to call if what we did caused trouble. Now a little worried, I said, I think you've got the wrong number. This is Seth, not Jeff. Don't go outdoors. The person shrieked. Completely freaked out, I disconnected the call. Must have been some prank caller, but I wasn't amused. Rattled, I put the matter behind me. Much later, I finished watching videos and shut the lights off to head upstairs. It was pitch black, but I knew the way. The dark seemed a little more oppressive this time, though. I shrugged off the feeling and went upstairs. As I passed through the living room, I chanced to look out the window. There were people outside, on a walk or something. I checked my watch and it said 3 a.m. That's weird, I muttered. I stumbled up to my upstairs room and drifted off to sleep. I was a fool that first night. If I'd recognized what I'd seen, I would have saved myself the terror and just stepped outside. The next morning, the news was on, odd, since my dad usually turned to the sports channel before we went off to work. I didn't even glance at it as I threw on a tie and stumbled into the bathroom. An uneasy feeling crept into my gut as I did my morning routine. I usually had to fight for bathroom space, but today there wasn't a sound. I peeked out of the room and saw that the front door was open, but the glass storm door wasn't. There wasn't a sound. Looking outdoors, I saw those same people as I'd seen the night before. I opened the door. Immediately, their heads snapped towards me. I recoiled and leapt inside as quickly as I could, feeling something catch at my ankle as I did so. Their faces were fixed in expressionless gazes, their mouths slightly agape and dripping blood. I looked down and saw one right next to the porch. Withdrawing its arm, it had tried to grab me. With a dizzying feeling of horror, I recognized my little brother. Slamming the door, I locked it tight and stumbled back into the living room. The television was reporting that a disease was spreading south from Canada across the U.S. I shut it off and pointlessly called out to see if anyone else was in the house. No answer. So began my solitary existence. The news ran for a few days before they were caught. Kept making the stupidest mistake, going home every night. The electricity has stayed running. I guess someone left the switch on at the factory. Or maybe it's just northern New England that's been overrun, I dunno. The internet's been out too, so that's annoying. While the news was running, they called them zombies, going back to that old standby. I guess it works. I mean, they don't do a whole lot, and they're definitely dead. They walk around until their legs rot out from under them, then they crawl until they literally fall to pieces. While they've got legs, though, they're fast. That's how they jumped my family, I suppose. And the police car that drove up to the house to see if there were any survivors. That wasn't fun to look at every morning. They overturned my car while chasing him, so I'm stuck. Cops to the rescue again. They didn't really need food, so they didn't finish eating the poor guy. But they dismembered him, that's why he couldn't get up and join them. I could see him gnashing his teeth fruitlessly, though. For about a week, a guy on the radio hopefully pointed out that they were falling to pieces, so all we needed to do was wait them out. Then he got impatient, went outdoors. Nobody's been on the radio for 2 weeks. I'm in trouble, though. You see, the house has no food left. I can't wait for them all to fall down dead all over again. I've made a couple expeditions to the general store. Lucky I had that sword collection upstairs. They're all too slow to catch me when I run, but there are so many that I sometimes panic. Last time, they nearly got me. I broke the front door getting back in. Now the cold seeps in every night, and I can see one standing out on the porch right now, not 10 feet from where I'm writing this. You're safe indoors. Don't ask me why they abhor coming inside. Whatever the reason, it's been my lifeline. Unfortunately, they seem to know that there's someone alive in the house. Don't ask me how. This fellow on the front step doesn't even have eyes anymore. Maybe they can hear a heartbeat or smell sweat. Or blood. I spent a couple days naming them. Some of the faces I recognized and gave their old names to them. The same old gang's been hanging around here for the last few weeks, slowly dropping in number as they fall to pieces. They've never wandered off, though. There are 79 who were once men and 63 who were once women out there. Once, just to see what would happen, I shot one in the head with our shotgun. You know, to see if the old shoot a zombie in the head and they die for good adage had any truth. So I've actually got 79 who were once men, 62 who were once women, and one who was once a woman and decided to keep standing even after losing about 80% of its head. And I'm down one shotgun shell. So they wait. And I'm losing it. I talk to myself constantly, and I ate a stuffed animal last night. The cotton went down hard, but it felt good to have something in my stomach again. There are no fruit trees around, and anyway, it's November. Water has been getting scarcer. The tap water stopped working 8 days ago. Lucky I'd filled the bathtub and every bottle I could find before it stopped. Oh, great. Now the lamp's getting brighter and I hear a buzzing sound. I wonder if the power's going OU. Well, that wasn't fun. Total loss of power for 4 days. Ever try sleeping in the dark knowing that there are things just outside that'll kill you and make you one of them the first chance they get? Probably, since these things are everywhere, as far as I can tell. Quick update, I mentioned Herschel, that guy on my porch. One of his legs fell off, so he's sitting down, sniffing at it. Thank God they lose all higher brain functions. I'm pretty sure the soul isn't held captive in these things, and that this is all the disease, or whatever, trying to spread itself as far as it can in the population. I don't know if you've noticed this, reader, but the animals just don't seem affected. It's a small comfort. Of course, they die if they eat the flesh, but they don't get back up once they die. Weird, huh? I'm getting hungry and desperate. Maybe, just maybe, I can load the old .22 and bag a squirrel from inside. But how will I go get it? On one hand, I'm a bit more optimistic that you're out there now, whoever you are. The power couldn't have come back if there weren't people out there working to restore order. I'm feeling lucky, time to grab a sword and go drop this in the brook. Maybe this whole thing is almost over. Maybe. On the other hand, if it is almost over, why are there fresh faces outside today? Janie awoke with a start, jerking out of her nightmare back into reality. She looked about her room, reassuring herself with its familiarity. The feel of the cotton sheets that she had washed till they were as soft as silk, the scratchy blanket her grandmother had given her for her 8th birthday, and the scent of smoke and lumber rising up from the basement. But as she settled back into her senses, things began to seem a little off. Her sheets seemed a touch too rough, the blanket felt like a slightly different material, and the smell of the room was a little too sharp, almost mechanical. She figured she was just a little rattled from the nightmare. It had been quite a doozy. She remembered being immersed in ice-cold water with a forest of wires coming in and out of her. There had been a cold mechanical eye hovering above her, suspended by a mechanical arm that hung from the ceiling. The blank red glare from its stare had bored into her eyes. She decided that a hot glass of milk would fix her up and send her right back to sleep. She ventured downstairs, almost breaking her neck in the process. It seemed the stairs were just a bit shorter than her feet remembered. A misplaced step sent her tumbling down them. Luckily, there was a landing to break her fall halfway down. Breathing heavily from the fall, and still shaken up by her nightmare, she tiptoed into the kitchen to get a glass of milk. But far from calming her down, the midnight beverage made things much worse. The milk tasted funny, not like it had gone bad, but just off. The mug felt too rough in her hands, and the beeps of the microwave were a few pitches off. She hurriedly finished her drink, wanting desperately to go back to bed. Surely when she awoke she would be back in the world she knew. She went to return the milk to its shelf in the fridge. But as she reached out to grasp the handle, she saw in the reflection of the polished refrigerator door the cold mechanical eye from her nightmare. She screamed in fright, dropped the milk, and whipped around ready to confront the demonic machine, but nothing was there. She cursed herself for being so stupid and got a rag to clean up the milk that had spilled from the container. As soon as it was mopped up, she hurried back upstairs, wanting desperately to lose herself in her sheets. She leaped back into her bed and hunkered down, eager for this strange experience to be over. But as she laid there, she felt something watching her. That mechanical eye from her dreams was haunting her waking thoughts. She decided to turn the lights on. She knew she was being silly, but it would make her feel better. She flipped the switch on her bedside lamp and looked about as light flooded the room. Nothing was there, just as she ought to have known. There was no mechanical eye hiding in the corners. But something was odd. The light, a curly fluorescent bulb that normally threw off a brilliant white light, was a few shades too yellow. It was almost unnatural, and it cast everything in a sickly light. Janie knew something was wrong, but she had no idea what it was or how to fix it. She turned to lie back down, hoping she could bury her problems in her dreams, but as she turned, her eyes caught the picture on her bedside table. It was from a Christmas several years ago. She was standing next to her brother, with their parents behind them and her dog sitting at their feet. They were all wearing goofy Christmas sweaters, and shredded wrapping paper was strewn about the floor. They each had a grin as wide as the Mississippi plastered across their faces, but above each grin sat a pair of cold, dead, mechanical eyes. Janie screamed, flailed, and crashed to her bedroom floor. She picked up the picture and hurled it into the back of her closet. Janie knew for certain now that something was wrong. Something had been wrong since she had awoken. Something was here. It took Janie several minutes to calm down, and she dared not look into her closet where the picture lurked. As she collected her thoughts, she started to realize more and more things were wrong. The grain of the wood floors ran the wrong way. Her walls were baby blue, not robin's egg. Hundreds of tiny details were wrong with her room. She had no idea how all of these things could have changed while she had slept. It began to dawn on her, the only explanation for all the changes. She had never woken up. She was still asleep, trapped in the most vivid dream she had ever had. So if she was asleep, then the solution was simple. She just had to wake up. Janie tried pinching herself, hoping that small act would bring her back to blessed familiarity, but no such luck. She tried pinching harder, more vicious, but it seemed no amount of pinching would end the nightmare. She tried kicking the bed frame, but she received nothing from it but several throbbing toes. She thought maybe a shower would do it. She went to her shower and turned the faucet on. She turned the knob to its coldest setting, hoping the shock of the water would awaken her. She pulled down the end of the faucet and water began to shoot out of the shower head. She undressed quickly, feeling goosebumps ripple across her body as cold droplets of water escaped the curtain and splashed her. She stepped into the shower, dreading the cold shock, but praying it would wake her up. It didn't. She stepped out and turned the knob all the way in the other direction, hoping hot water could accomplish what cold water could not. As she waited for the water to heat up, the bathroom began to fill with steam. After several minutes, she was sure the water was plenty hot enough, and its touch would rescue her from this nightmare. She stepped into the shower. The water burned. She wanted to scream out in pain, but she stayed as long as she could, hoping enough pain would wake her up. Eventually, when she could take no more, she stepped out into her steam-filled bathroom. Her body was covered in angry red streaks from the scalding hot water. As she looked about her for her clothes, she noticed the steam was sinking to the floor, as though it were unnaturally heavy. Janie began to worry. What if she could never wake up? She dried off and threw her clothes back on. As she went to leave, she looked into the mirror, and behind her, hanging from its lifeless mechanical arm, was that cold mechanical eye. Janie screamed and sprinted out of the bathroom and down the stairs. She needed to wake up now. That thing was growing bolder, and it was coming for her. She didn't know what else to try. What could possibly wake her up? As she thought, she began to hear mechanical whirring and clicks from the hallways. She retreated to the center of the kitchen, getting as far from the noises as she could. The noises grew louder and drew closer. She began to sob, praying to God that this whole thing would just end. She just wanted life to be normal again. An idea began to form in Janie's mind. There was one thing that always woke you up from your dreams. Whenever you were about to fall to your death, you woke up. Whenever the psychotic murderer was about to catch you, you woke up. Janie just needed to die, and she would wake up, but she couldn't let that thing be what killed her. She didn't know how or why, but she knew if it caught her, she would never wake up. The noises drew closer and Janie began to cry again, but her desperate plan filled her with a grim determination. She crept to the corner where she kept the knives. It was gruesome, but she knew what had to be done. She opened the cabinet and pulled out a small paring knife. It didn't need to be large to get the job done, just sharp. The noises drew closer and increased in volume, filling Janie with dread. She began to draw the knife down her arms, opening large slits in the belly of her forearms. She watched as blood poured out across her arms and spilled onto the counter. She laughed as she watched, too mentally exhausted to care. She worried only about waking up. She looked up from her arms, feeling woozy, and in the doorway of the kitchen hung the cold mechanical eye. Janie screamed. She wasn't awake yet. She wasn't dying fast enough. Her fear coursed through her, filling her mangled limbs with strength. She grabbed a large butcher's knife from its holder and slammed it into her own chest. She laughed manically as she watched her lifeblood pour out of her chest. It was a sickly, unnatural shade of red. She looked up and saw the cold mechanical eye advancing towards her. She sobbed and shrieked as that monster drew closer. She pulled the knife out and drove it home again. Blood came thundering from her chest. As it rushed out of her and pooled on the floor, Janie collapsed. She lay on the ground, her vision fading, and she smiled in victory, knowing she had beat that demonic machine. She was waking up. Janie lay in a plexiglass container, surrounded by ice water. A forest of wires and tubes led in and out of her body. Her body jerked spasmodically. She appeared to be fighting some invisible foe. The system watched as she struggled with her virtual reality. She was quickly becoming a very interesting subject. No one had ever noticed it was an illusion so quickly and so many times in a row. This was her fastest time yet. Only 30 minutes and she had successfully terminated the sequence. Her mind had even managed to retain some images of the system itself. The system was impressed. In a few more trials, the subject would be approved for cloning. Her genes could prove quite valuable for future science. The cold mechanical eye lowered itself to Janie's container and began running diagnostics on the events of the last sequence. Hopefully she would improve again. Some subjects suffered too much psychological damage to continue testing. Such subjects were bad for science. Some may call Janie's treatment torture, that it was not proper science, but she was still alive, and that was more than you could say about many of her fellow subjects. The mechanical eye completed its diagnostic procedures and reset the sequence. Janie awoke with a start, jerking out of her nightmare back into reality. I played the most disturbing game of Never Have I Ever. I'm in college. Last night, I played the most disturbing game of Never Have I Ever with my roommates. If you don't know the game, it goes like this: everyone holds up 5 fingers. You go around the room, saying never have I ever followed by something you've never done. Everyone who's done that thing has to put a finger down. 5 fingers down and you lose. Anyway, last night we'd been drinking a bit, and a lot of juicy secret sharing was going on. We'd learned Tina and Layla had been skinny dipping, I'd cheated on a test, and now Layla had been in a threesome. You had a threesome? Erin gasped. Who? Who was it? She doesn't have to tell. That's not part of the rules, Tina said. But, Erin pouted. Okay, fine. My turn. Never have I ever had sex outside. You know, if you keep doing sex once, I'm going to lose in like 2 seconds, Layla said, adjusting her glasses. Okay. I'll do something different, Tina said. She leaned in closer and lowered her voice to an almost whisper. Never have I ever seen someone die. An uneasy silence settled over us. Our smiles faded and we glanced at each other. Then Erin and I each put our fingers down. Going with the creepy theme here, Layla said, never have I ever used a Ouija board. Erin and I put our fingers down again. It had been back in September. Shortly after that girl, Lucy, disappeared. 1 year above us, majoring in art history. Looking back on it, it wasn't the most respectful thing to do. She was dead, probably. And here we were making some spooky thing out of it. Although, not to shift blame, but it really was Erin's idea. Your turn, Layla said. Right. Okay. My throat was dry. I reached over and took a sip of my grasshopper. Never have I ever smoked pot. Then it was Erin's turn. She spun off mine, saying she'd never smoked a cigarette. And then we were back to Tina. For a second, she didn't say anything. We all stared at her, and she stared back, her eyes nearly black in the dim light. She was smiling, slightly, as she looked at all of us. Hesitating, ramping up the tension. Never have I ever killed someone. Dead silence. Then Layla finally spoke, forcing a laugh. What the fuck? She asked, crossing her tattooed arms over her chest. Of course none of us have ever. She stopped mid-sentence. And then she pointed at Erin. You had 3 fingers up before, she said, her voice weak. Small. I looked at Erin. She sat there, stone-faced, holding up her pinky and ring fingers. She surveyed Layla with her cold blue eyes, then shook her head. No, I didn't. You totally did. Did you kill someone? Erin narrowed her eyes. If I did, do you really think I'd be stupid enough to put down a finger? Tina and I glanced at each other, eyes wide. Layla, I finally cut in. I'm sure she had 3 fingers up before. You sure? You saw her? No, I didn't see her, but I mean, obviously, she didn't kill anyone. Layla focused back on Erin. You put 1 down for the Ouija board, and 1 for seeing someone die. What was the 3rd one for? Skinny dipping, she replied, without hesitating. No. Wait, Tina cut in. That doesn't make sense. You said you don't know how to swim. That's why you wouldn't come with us to Lake Crystal. So? You can skinny dip without swimming. That's why it's called skinny dipping, not skinny swimming. But I could hear it in her voice. She was getting flustered. My stomach twisted and my heart began to pound. No. There's no way. Is there? There was no way Erin killed someone. And even if she had, there was no way she'd admit it in a game of Never Have I Ever. The whole thing was ridiculous. But then why is she acting so weird? Why isn't she just laughing it off? My hands were shaking now. I looked at Layla and Tina, and they both looked just as terrified as I was. Maybe she did kill someone. Maybe. Something was bothering me, nagging at the back of my mind. Something I thought was insignificant when it happened, but now seemed very significant. I don't want to play anymore, Erin said abruptly. She got up off the floor and set her drink down on the table. You guys are being too weird. She started down the hallway where her and my bedrooms lay. Wait. I stood up. She slowly turned around. What, Caroline? She asked, her eyes empty. You going to accuse me of murder too? No. Just, where were you that night? The night Lucy went missing? Excuse me, she spat. The gears were turning in my head. Before, I hadn't put the pieces together. It wasn't weird for Erin to be out that night. I'd been out all night, at Jared's place or at a party, and so had Tina and Layla. And yet, it wasn't a weekend night. It was just a random Wednesday, around 2 a.m., when I heard Erin's door creak open next to mine. Heard her footsteps, thumping down the hall. I'd woken again with a start around 4 a.m. to hear her coming home. Later that day we'd heard Lucy was missing. Where were you? I asked, again. I heard you leave. Around 2 a.m. It was the night she went missing. Erin's expression blanked. Then, in an instant, she ran down the hallway. She pushed me aside, roughly, and I fell to the floor. My head made a sickening thwack as it hit the floor. Distantly, I heard the other girls scream. Above me, I saw the door swing open, and then slam shut. I scrambled up. But it was too late. By the time I peered into the hallway, she was already gone. No one has found Erin yet. I don't know what happened to Lucy, and I don't even know if she's guilty. But I wonder if she didn't actually mean to put her finger down during our game. If maybe, she did it without thinking, on instinct. Or, if maybe, something unseen forced her finger down.